Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the territory of Cinema Channel. We're so glad you're here with us today. Please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy our content. Today, we are going to be diving deep into the absolute classic Terminator 2 Judgment Day from 1991. A chilling vision of a future war where machines dominate humanity sets the stage for a paradoxical intervention in the past. A seemingly indestructible cyborg, the T-1000 liquid metal flowing through its very being, is dispatched from this grim future, its singular mission to terminate a boy named John Connor, the future leader of the human resistance. This relentless hunter, a technological marvel surpassing the capabilities of the original Terminator Arnold Schwarzenegger famously portrayed, possesses an unnerving ability to mimic any form it touches, making it an almost invisible threat. Meanwhile, the resistance, led by the adult John Connor, sends back their own champion, a reprogrammed T-800, the very model that once terrorized Sarah Connor. This older model, bearing the familiar, almost comforting bulk of Schwarzenegger, is now tasked with protecting the very person it once hunted. The narrative thrusts us into the chaotic world of a troubled youth, John, living in foster care, displaying the rebellious streak that will one day define his command over armies. His mother, Sarah Connor, a woman hardened by years of relentless fear and preparation, having faced down the first machine, is now institutionalized, her warnings about the coming apocalypse dismissed as delusion. The T-800, with its methodical, almost mechanical dedication, breaks John out of the facility. There is a beautiful, almost paternal evolution in their relationship. The machine, incapable of true emotion but capable of learning protocols, begins to adopt certain human mannerisms, perhaps reflecting the essence of the human it is sworn to protect. We see flashes of the T-800's past programming influencing its actions, notably its encyclopedic knowledge of weaponry and its stoic responses to extreme danger. This mirrors the inherent conflict within the narrative. Can a machine truly understand humanity or merely mimic survival tactics? Sarah, upon rejoining John and their metallic guardian, is a different creature entirely, lean, focused, and lethally capable, a testament to the grueling training she undertook after the first film, fueled by the terrifying certainty of Judgment Day. Her drive is absolute. Stop Cyberdyne Systems, the company responsible for the creation of Skynet, the artificial intelligence that precipitates the nuclear holocaust. This pursuit leads them to Miles Dyson, the brilliant engineer at Cyberdyne, the architect of the very technology that dooms mankind. Confronting Dyson is fraught with tension. He is not a villain, but a man driven by innovation, unaware of the apocalyptic progeny of his work. Sarah's initial violent approach is tempered by the T-800's intervention, revealing the tangible proof of the future catastrophe, pieces of the original Terminator salvaged from the wreckage years prior. This confrontation is a pivotal moment, forcing a brilliant mind to grapple with a truth beyond current comprehension. The decision to destroy the research, the microchips that will lead to Skynet, is a shared one, an act of self-sacrifice against the relentless march of technological destiny. The ensuing chase sequence involving the relentless T-1000 is a masterclass in action filmmaking, drawing heavily on the inherent tension of a seemingly unwinnable scenario. The Liquid Terminator's ability to shapeshift and utilize its environment makes every corner turned a potential death trap. The pursuit escalates through urban sprawl, culminating in a desperate confrontation at a steel mill. Here, the nature of the two machines is laid bare, the brute force and vulnerability of the T-800 against the adaptive, almost ethereal threat of the T-1000. In the final moments, the T-800 understands that merely stopping the present threat is insufficient. The future must be permanently altered. To ensure Skynet can never be born from this timeline's remnants, the T-800 subjects itself to destruction in the molten steel, a poignant self-sacrifice. This act is not mere programming, it embodies a profound protection of John Connor, arguably a form of loyalty transcending its mechanical origins. Sarah watches, knowing that the promise of a future free from the machines now rests solely on her son. The final image is one of cautious hope, the landscape clear of imminent metallic threats, yet the memory of the struggle remains etched on the faces of the survivors, a quiet acknowledgement of the heavy price paid for a single, uncertain future. The arrival of the T-800 is jarring, a sudden, imposing figure cutting through the neon-drenched chaos of a Los Angeles night. Its movements, though efficient, carry a weight that belies the advanced nature of its skeletal framework beneath the synthetic flesh, a stark contrast to the T-1000's fluid, almost ghostly infiltration capabilities. The older model, imprinted with the memory of its past failures and Sarah's suffering, exhibits a peculiar, almost earnest commitment to its new directive. One can sense the echoes of James Cameron's directorial vision, a man fascinated by the dual nature of technology, capable of both creating miracles and orchestrating Armageddon, in the machine's cold, logical adherence to saving the boy. John Connor, portrayed with a restless energy that masks deep-seated abandonment issues, initially views the Terminator as just another dangerous artifact from his mother's obsessive crusade. His early interactions are marked by defiant sarcasm, a defense mechanism against a world that has taught him trust is a fatal weakness. Yet, the T-800's unwavering presence, its consistent application of rules, "I will not harm humans unless provoked," begins to chip away at John's hardened shell. The scene where the T-800 slowly processes and then mimics a simple act of bonding, perhaps learning the concept of a thumbs-up gesture, is profoundly moving precisely because of its artificiality. It is learning humanity through imitation, a mirror held up to our own behaviors. Sarah Connor's transformation is perhaps the film's most powerful character arc, a shift from victim to warrior honed in the fires of paranoia. Her confinement in the mental institution is less about madness and more about the unbearable burden of knowing too much. When she's freed by the T-800, her reunion with John is bittersweet, tainted by the knowledge that their only protector is the very kind of entity that nearly destroyed them before. Sarah's obsession with Miles Dyson is rooted in a primal need to excise the cancer of Skynet before it metastasizes. Her initial rage, the desire to execute Dyson before he can complete his work, speaks volumes about the psychological toll of living perpetually on the brink of extinction. For her, preventative murder is merely efficient self-preservation. Dyson, the architect of doom, is depicted not as a megalomaniac, but as a devoted scientist whose vision of creating advanced defense systems ironically leads to humanity's greatest threat. The moment he is shown the future, the ruins, the scorched earth, the relentless attack dogs of the machine age, his worldview shatters. His decision to collaborate in the destruction of his own life's work, symbolized by the meticulous dismantling of the Cyberdyne lab, is an act of redemption that elevates him beyond a mere plot device. This collaborative destruction highlights a recurring theme in great science fiction: the necessity of sacrificing present progress for future survival. The T-1000, by contrast, is pure, expressionless horror. Its creation represents a terrifying leap in technological sophistication. Where the T-800 is defined by heavy impacts and visible resilience, the T-1000 flows, adapting instantly, its mimicry flawless until a critical moment of stress reveals its true, silvery viscosity. It's an embodiment of infiltration and insidious threat, a perfect counterpoint to the T-800's reliable, if limited, protection. Its single-minded pursuit, lacking any discernible personality beyond programmed efficiency, makes its mechanical determination all the more terrifying than any grand scheme driven by malice. The final stand at the steel mill is staged not just for spectacle, but as a symbolic purification. The molten metal acts as the ultimate litmus test for the nature of existence. The T-800, knowing its end is necessary for John's survival, not just his physical survival, but the survival of the future concept he embodies, embraces its own destruction. Its final act, ensuring the impossibility of future machine incursions by melting itself down, is portrayed with a sense of tragic nobility. It achieves something akin to soul through duty. The farewell glance exchanged between the machine and John, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged under impossible pressure, leaves an indelible mark. Sarah, standing by, doesn't just witness the death of a machine. She sees the culmination of years of sacrifice, the necessary shedding of the past to allow John to walk into a future that is, for the first time, truly uncertain, and thus truly free. The lingering image of the T-800 sinking into the incandescent liquid is not just the end of a powerful weapon, it's the conclusion of an unlikely, profoundly influential mentorship. For John, this sacrifice solidifies the lessons learned. That true strength isn't about brute force or technological superiority, but about the willingness to choose a path that safeguards others, even at ultimate personal cost. The machine, designed for termination, effectively models altruism, a concept it only grasped through sustained exposure to the desperate humanity of the Connors. It's a chilling reflection on how easily concepts like heroism can be programmed or learned, blurring the lines between true feeling and flawless execution. Sarah, watching the chrome dissolve, carries the full weight of this averted future. Her years spent preparing for the war have ironically equipped her to appreciate the fragile peace she now witnesses. Her voice, which had been sharp and almost manic throughout the ordeal, softens as she drives away with John. The exhaustion etched onto her features is now tempered by a glimmer of hope, the kind that can only exist when the overwhelming certainty of doom has been momentarily suspended. Her journey has taken her from waitress to prophet, and now, perhaps, to simply being a mother again, albeit one whose child is destined to lead. This quiet journey away from the chaos underscores the film's thesis. Saving the world often means retreating from the immediate spectacle and focusing on the slower, more arduous task of raising the next generation correctly. The T-1000's demise, too, carries its own grim poetry. Its metallic body, unable to withstand the extreme heat, buckles and melts, not with a dramatic explosion but with a grotesque, slow disintegration, emphasizing the fundamental weakness of its highly advanced, yet ultimately vulnerable composition. It was a perfect predator, but it could not comprehend the concept of self-erasure for a greater good. Its programming demanded survival above all else. This stands in stark relief to the T-800's final conscious decision to terminate its own existence to eliminate the technological seeds of Skynet. The quiet scenes following the climactic battle reveal the true aftermath. John, no longer just the rebellious foster kid, displays a newfound thoughtfulness, a maturity forced upon him by circumstances beyond his years. He understands the necessity of secrecy. The world must not know how close it came to annihilation, nor must it be tempted to replicate the technology that nearly destroyed it. This understanding hints at the burden of leadership already settling upon him, the necessity of keeping vital truths hidden for the common good. The film closes on an image deliberately devoid of bombast, focusing instead on the vast, empty road ahead. This emptiness is significant. It suggests not that the war is over, but that the primary threat has been excised from this timeline. The future remains unwritten, an open field of possibility rather than a foregone conclusion of nuclear winter. It's a testament to the enduring power of human will, even when championed by an unlikely reprogrammed machine, to steer destiny away from the abyss. The emotional resonance of the story lies in this fragile hope, bought at the high price of the T-800's sacrifice and Sarah's sanity. The fragile peace achieved hangs heavy with the weight of necessity, a quiet understanding between mother and son that the real struggle is not against metal behemoths, but against human complacency and the relentless march of innovation. Sarah, driving west beneath a sun that feels newly earned, consciously steers John away from the trauma she has internalized, seeking a sense of normalcy that might allow him to grow into the leader he is meant to be, rather than the soldier she has desperately tried to mold him into. Her vigilance, however, remains an unshakable constant, a necessary shadow cast by the apocalyptic visions that still haunt her sleep. She has seen the future, and knowing it is a burden she can never fully shed, influencing every decision, every quiet glance toward the horizon. John, now afforded the luxury of merely being a teenager for a short while, absorbs the lessons learned in the crucible of conflict. He is no longer merely reacting to his mother's frantic warnings. He is beginning to understand the abstract danger of unchecked technological ambition. The memory of the T-800, its methodical kindness, its ultimate self-destruction, serves as his primary moral compass. This machine, devoid of biological imperative, taught him more about duty and protection than any human figure might have. It's a poignant commentary on the human condition, suggesting that sometimes the most profound lessons in compassion are learned from the purest forms of programmed loyalty. The absence of the familiar metallic guardian leaves a palpable void, a space where unconditional protection once resided, forcing John to internalize that protection is now his sole responsibility. Their destination is deliberately vague, a move toward anonymity that reflects Sarah's deep-seated paranoia regarding Cyberdyne's legacy. Even though the physical remnants of the research have been destroyed, the idea, the potential for an artificial intelligence to emerge, remains a constant threat woven into the fabric of modern technology. This hints at a future narrative where the fight isn't just physical confrontation, but an ongoing ideological battle against technological hubris. The film subtly suggests that Judgment Day, while postponed, is not permanently cancelled. It has merely been reset, waiting for another brilliant mind, another accidental discovery to spark the digital inferno anew. The final narrative beat emphasizes the theme of fate versus free will. By eliminating the key components of Skynet's inception, they have thrown a wrench into the established timeline, proving that even against the most deterministic forces, the supposed certainty of the machine's victory, human agency, however messy and violent, can carve out a reprieve. The open road symbolizes this unwritten future. It is a road filled with possibility, but also underscored by the profound responsibility of remembrance. Sarah and John carry the truth of the war, becoming silent guardians of a history that the rest of the world remains blissfully ignorant of, forever bonded by the shared trauma and the memory of the Terminator who learned, ultimately, what it meant to be a savior. The silence of the open road is not truly empty. It vibrates with the echoes of explosions and the phantom sensation of liquid metal reforming. Sarah Connor, gripping the steering wheel, drives not just away from a location, but away from a certainty. Her eyes, once fiercely focused on imminent danger, now search the passing landscape with a more nuanced intensity, looking for signs of healthy growth, for the normalcy she fought so hard to secure for her son. She understands that the real long war begins now, the war against apathy. Having tasted victory over the immediate, tangible threat, she must now face the slow, insidious erosion of vigilance that comes with peacetime. Her demeanor retains the hard-earned discipline of a soldier, yet there's a subtle thawing, a small space opening up for the woman she almost ceased to be, the mother who can finally teach John about life beyond survival. John, occupying the passenger seat, is experiencing a profound, almost unnatural stillness. The constant adrenaline rush that defined his adolescence is receding, leaving him vulnerable to the quiet processing of events. He observes his mother, recognizing the deep, invisible scars her fight has left. Where once he rebelled against her fanaticism, he now sees the painful logic behind it. The T-800, in its cold, efficient way, served as a bizarre but effective teacher, demonstrating commitment and selfless action. John looks at his hands, perhaps imagining the weight of command he will one day bear, but for now, he clings to the transient moments of reprieve, the shared meal, the brief, unguarded laugh. He understands implicitly that the machines sent saviors and destroyers with equal ease, and that humanity's path depends entirely on which lessons it chooses to internalize from its own creations. The film's conclusion, deliberately ambiguous in its promise of safety, forces the audience to confront the idea that technological advancement, divorced from ethical constraints, is the true, perpetual antagonist. Cyberdyne Systems is gone, but the spirit of boundless innovation, the very drive that birthed Skynet, remains embedded in human nature. This leaves Sarah and John in a peculiar exile. They are guardians of a secret that, if revealed, would either cause global panic or inspire a reckless attempt to replicate the lost technology. Their existence becomes a self-imposed penance, living on the fringes to ensure the center holds. The narrative choice to end not with a bang, but with a look toward an uncertain future, is Cameron's assertion that hope is an active verb, not a passive state. It demands constant maintenance. The final moments suggest that John Connor will grow up to be a leader defined not by the battles he fought, but by the wisdom he gathered from the unlikely protectors sent to guide him. He learned about loyalty from a machine whose defining characteristic was its lack of soul. This inversion, the creation teaching the creator, is the film's most enduring, chilling commentary on the precarious balance between human ingenuity and catastrophic consequence. They drive on, two figures against a vast, empty sky, carrying the heavy, quiet burden of having momentarily cheated the inevitable. The highway stretches before them, an endless ribbon of asphalt symbolizing both freedom and the vast expanse of the unknown future they now inhabit. Sarah's grip on the wheel is no longer solely driven by escape velocity, it's tempered by a new, subtle protectiveness aimed at fostering resilience in John, rather than just physical survival. She remembers the look in the T-800's optical sensors when it recognized its impending fate, a moment of programmed finality that somehow transcended mere circuitry. That memory fuels her resolve to raise John not as a messianic figure constantly hunted, but as a resourceful human capable of making informed choices when the next inevitable crisis arrives. Her internal landscape is still scarred, filled with the spectral images of flaming cities, but for the first time since the first Terminator, the fear is secondary to the task of parenting. John's silence is contemplative. He occasionally glances at his mother, recognizing the profound exhaustion beneath her composed exterior. The machine's sacrifice taught him a complex lesson about value, that something created solely for destruction could ultimately embody the highest form of preservation. This paradox, that the greatest human quality might be best demonstrated by an artificial construct, weighs heavily on his young mind. He starts to see the world less in terms of simple binaries, good versus evil, human versus machine, and more as a spectrum of complex dependencies and consequences. He is beginning to embody the strategic thinking that will one day make him a commander, understanding that victory often requires eliminating the source, not just fighting the symptom. The implication that the future is only reset, not cancelled, dictates their future existence. They are living in borrowed time, acutely aware that the foundational human impulse toward technological curiosity remains unchecked in the world they rejoin. This forces a separation. Sarah understands that John must integrate back into a semblance of society, not remain perpetually underground as she might prefer. He needs the cultural context that will allow him to eventually lead the scattered remnants of humanity. The loneliness of their secret knowledge becomes the defining characteristic of their bond, a shared experience that isolates them from everyone else who remains blissfully unaware of the digital ticking clock beneath their feet. The film achieves its lasting power by refusing a neat resolution. It provides emotional closure regarding the T-800, a character arc successfully completed through self-termination for the sake of his ward, but it leaves the existential threat looming. As the landscape transitions from the scorched industrial wasteland of the steel mill to the sunlit, deceptively normal American countryside, the audience is left with the unsettling feeling that the ultimate battle for survival will be fought in the minds of engineers and programmers, not just on battlefields. The drive continues, suggesting that the true Judgment Day is not a specific event, but the ongoing state of human responsibility in the face of exponential power. The setting sun casts long, deepening shadows across the plains, mirroring the growing sense of profound, ongoing responsibility settling upon Sarah and John. They pass small towns, snapshots of the normal life they are temporarily reclaiming, yet every passing car, every blinking neon sign of a corporate office, registers to Sarah as a potential incubation site for the next Skynet. Her hypervigilance, once a source of friction, now feels like a necessary, exhausting shield. She is acutely aware that the world's collective memory is short. The near-apocalypse averted by immense sacrifice will soon be dismissed as the rantings of an institutionalized woman, paving the way for future technological missteps. This knowledge forces her to become more selective in her warnings, honing her future counsel to John not into panicked outbursts, but into carefully chosen parables about restraint and skepticism regarding unchecked progress. John, absorbing the vastness of the landscape, begins to internalize the T-800's final lesson, that some acts are so critical they require the absolute erasure of self. He doesn't grieve the Terminator as a friend in the traditional sense, but rather as the embodiment of the most pure, self-sacrificing duty he has ever witnessed. This relationship redefines what heroism means for him. It is not about conquering enemies, but about securing a viable tomorrow for those who cannot fight yet. He starts seeing the future resistance not as a band of hardened soldiers, but as the vulnerable civilians he is now learning to protect alongside his mother. This shift marks the true beginning of his evolution, from a boy resisting authority to a leader understanding the nature of guardianship. The lingering scent of ozone and burning metal seems to follow them, a phantom reminder that their actions have created a temporal anomaly. By destroying the microchips and the remnants of Cyberdyne's R&D, they have amputated a key limb of the future war. But they haven't cured the disease of technological arrogance. Sarah knows that somewhere, perhaps in a different laboratory, another engineer is on the cusp of a breakthrough that could inadvertently lead down the same path. This understanding shifts their focus from outright prevention, which has proven devastatingly difficult, to preparation. They are now preparing John not just to fight, but to guide humanity away from the same seductive traps that nearly ended the world once before. Their journey forward is framed by a somber determination. The film concludes not with celebration, but with the quiet understanding that the fight against extinction is cyclical, woven into the fabric of human endeavor. They remain two isolated figures holding a secret that defines reality, forever looking over their shoulders. The final note is one of earned vigilance. The war is not won, it has merely been deferred, awaiting the maturation of the boy who saw a machine learn to die for humanity, thereby illuminating the most essential aspects of what it means to truly live. The transition from the searing heat of the steel mill to the cool, anonymous air of the open road feels like stepping out of a fever dream, yet the residual tension in Sarah's shoulders refuses to dissipate. She drives with a fierce economy of motion, every calculated lane change reflecting years spent mastering survival in hostile environments. Her internal monologue is a constant risk assessment, a tactical briefing running against the backdrop of mundane scenery. She sees the potential in every quiet diner and every isolated gas station, places where they might settle, and places where they might be found. Her greatest fear now is complacency, the seductive lie that the danger has passed. She channels the energy she once poured into violent preparation into crafting a mental blueprint for John's future leadership. A blueprint rooted in caution, skepticism toward centralization, and a deep respect for the non-technological aspects of survival, lessons hard-learned from her own near breakdown fueled by pure paranoia. John, observing the world rush by, experiences the strange peace of a survivor who has witnessed the ultimate price of failure. The holographic memory of the T-800's unwavering form sinking into the flames is a constant silent tutorial. This machine, designed for termination, paradoxically taught him more about human devotion than he had learned from flesh-and-blood role models. He begins to process the irony. To save mankind, a machine had to teach a human how to truly value life and self-sacrifice. He is learning that leadership isn't about demanding allegiance. It's about inspiring sacrifice through credible example. When he looks at his mother, he sees not just the relentless warrior, but the woman who endured unimaginable psychological torment to give him this fragile opportunity at an unwritten future. Their bond solidifies into a quiet partnership, forged by shared trauma that no outsider could ever comprehend. Their westward trajectory is more symbolic than geographical. They are heading toward the possibility of self-reinvention, away from the gravitational pull of Los Angeles and the specific historical timeline that birthed Skynet. They understand that the technological seeds of destruction are not isolated to one company. They are inherent in the human drive for progress without foresight. This realization imbues their silence with shared purpose. They are the memory of a world that almost ended, tasked with subtly guiding the trajectory of a world that remains blissfully unaware. Their mission is no longer about stopping a single machine or a single engineer. It is about nurturing the spirit of resistance within John, ensuring that when the inevitable next technological temptation arises, he will have the wisdom, learned from a machine's death, to steer humanity clear of the abyss once more. The vast, rolling landscapes they traverse offer a visual counterpoint to the cramped, pressurized existence they have left behind. For Sarah, the sheer emptiness outside the car window is both terrifying and liberating. It represents space, space to breathe, space to teach, space to heal, but it also signifies isolation. She knows that true sanctuary is impossible. The war is simply transitioning phases, moving from kinetic combat to ideological warfare fought in the realm of human ambition and invention. She deliberately chooses routes that avoid major technological hubs, teaching John to rely on rudimentary skills, reading maps, understanding natural terrain, the very skills that the machines, focused on digital dominance, often overlook. This regression to foundational competency is her way of inoculating John against the hyper-reliance on technology that doomed the previous timeline. John, increasingly comfortable in the role of the perceptive observer, begins to notice the subtle ways his mother adapts. The frantic energy is still present, but it is now channeled into meticulous planning for the long haul. He sees the weight of the future pressing down on her, a burden she accepts stoically. He starts asking questions not about Terminators, but about the world before Skynet, the culture, the art, the things worth fighting for beyond mere survival. This marks a critical pivot. He is seeking the content of humanity, not just the means to defend it. The absence of the T-800 leaves an educational void, one that Sarah must now fill with the messy, contradictory substance of human history and morality. Their shared secret acts as an invisible tether, binding them tighter than any biological relationship. They exist slightly outside the established flow of time, haunted by foreknowledge. This shared existential pressure forces a rare honesty between them. There are no more shouting matches about bunkers or survival gear. There is only the sober, quiet acknowledgement of their unique burden. They are the living archive of a nightmare narrowly averted, and this knowledge confers upon them a strange authority, even in their anonymity. The thematic weight of the closing moments hinges on the notion that fate is malleable, provided the right sacrifices are made at the right junctures. The T-800's final decision was a technological act of faith, a programming override executed by what seemed to be emergent loyalty. By choosing self-destruction over preserving its own advanced hardware, which could have been salvaged and studied, it ensured that the very blueprint for Skynet's superior future iterations was annihilated. Sarah and John drive on, not into guaranteed victory, but into a future that has been granted a precious, fragile chance. They are the seeds of the resistance, nurtured by a machine's dying loyalty, forever aware that the greatest enemy is not the Terminator, but the human failure to learn from extinction. The setting sun bathes the interior of the car in a warm, almost deceptive glow, highlighting the fine lines of fatigue around Sarah's eyes, lines earned not just by battle, but by the relentless mental calculus of preemptive defense. She views the horizon not as an endpoint, but as a blank slate demanding constant supervision. Her focus shifts to the practicalities of blending in, of establishing a life unassuming enough to avoid attracting the notice of any residual technological scrutiny, whether from government agencies or the lingering echoes of Cyberdyne's research ethos scattered across the nation. Sarah finds herself actively avoiding modern conveniences, teaching John a deep, almost Luddite appreciation for analog systems, paper maps, mechanical watches, and face-to-face communication. This isn't mere paranoia, it is a strategic necessity born from the knowledge that every networked device is a potential listening post for a future intelligence. John, now slightly taller, carries himself with a new, measured stillness. The recklessness that defined his early years has been replaced by a cautious awareness. He watches the world with the calculated gaze of someone who knows the rules of engagement are constantly shifting. The memory of the T-800's final moments has crystallized into a core philosophical principle for him. Efficacy in defense often requires the rejection of self-preservation when the greater good is at stake. This lesson, delivered by an unfeeling machine, provides a moral anchor that surprisingly grounds his adolescent turmoil. He starts to see his mother not as an oppressor, but as a field general fighting a war the rest of the world hasn't even acknowledged has begun. Their conversations become less about defiance and more about strategy, how to maintain anonymity while planting the seeds for the future fight. The vehicle becomes their mobile sanctuary, a small bubble of shared reality moving through a world moving toward potential doom. They understand that the future is no longer written in the stark, metallic certainty of the original timeline, but in the choices made day by day, moment by moment. Every purchase, every conversation, every stop along the road is weighed against the possibility of detection. This constant pressure refines John, forcing him to mature rapidly into the role of collaborator rather than just recipient of his mother's desperate plan. He is beginning to internalize the immense responsibility of being the linchpin of the future resistance, learning to wear the mantle of importance with quiet seriousness instead of boastful rebellion. Ultimately, the film leaves us suspended in this state of uneasy transition. The destruction of the future hardware ensures a temporary reprieve, but the human element, the relentless drive toward creating what we cannot control, remains the ultimate unsolved variable. Sarah and John drive on, a small, highly motivated unit against the backdrop of a vast, unsuspecting populace. Their existence is a silent promise to the fallen machine that its ultimate sacrifice, the deliberate, conscious annihilation of its own advanced form, will not be in vain, ensuring that the fragile, unwritten future has at least a fighting chance to emerge from the ashes of what might have been. The silence inside the car is now layered with shared understanding, a form of communication that requires no speech. Sarah drives, her profile illuminated by the occasional passing vehicle, a constant study in controlled tension. She has consciously chosen to foster John's capacity for strategic thought over mere reaction, understanding that the coming conflict will be one of attrition and foresight, not just brute force encounters like the one at the steel mill. She occasionally glances at John, noting the subtle way he scans the environment. A habit ingrained from necessity, but now tempered with John's own burgeoning wisdom. He is beginning to grasp the true nature of the threat, that Skynet wasn't just an accident of technology, but a crystallization of humanity's willingness to outsource critical thinking and warfare capabilities without fully comprehending the consequence. John, in turn, seeks out those moments of normalcy, clinging to them as proof that the world they saved is worth fighting for. He occasionally pulls out a cassette tape, perhaps some rock music from the era, and the sound floods the car, a defiant assertion of human culture against the sterile efficiency of the machines. He finds a strange comfort in the T-800's sacrifice because it was decisive and clean, a singular act of purpose. In the face of messy human politics and flawed decision-making, the machine's clear directive to protect him resonated with an almost spiritual clarity. He is realizing that leadership, as envisioned by his future self, will demand making impossible choices akin to the T-800's final act, prioritizing the long-term survival of the whole over the immediate preservation of the part. Their journey westward is less about finding a specific place and more about maintaining momentum, about staying ahead of the historical inertia that seeks to pull events back onto their predestined catastrophic track. They know that time travel, even with the hardware destroyed, leaves ripples, and they must navigate the unpredictable currents of that altered reality. Sarah consciously avoids discussing the adult John Connor's future military campaigns with him, fearful of influencing the timeline too severely, yet every lesson she imparts about resource management, about trust calibrated carefully, is undeniably preparation for that very role. The emotional residue of their ordeal manifests subtly. Sarah will occasionally flinch at the sound of a heavy truck, a physical echo of the T-1000's approach. John, however, demonstrates a detached empathy, acknowledging his mother's trauma while focusing on the immediate reality. This maturity, forged in terror and catalyzed by machine loyalty, is the true hope. The film ends not with the triumph of human ingenuity, but with the profound recognition that true progress sometimes necessitates radical self-correction and the willingness to accept guidance from the most unlikely, least human sources. They drive toward an unknown future, two solitary figures carrying the heavy, beautiful secret that destiny can indeed be rewritten, one painful, sacrificial choice at a time. The sun, now high above the vast, indifferent plains, beats down on the aging vehicle, forcing Sarah to keep the air conditioning, a modern concession she grudgingly allows, running near its limit. She understands that maintaining this facade of normalcy requires energy, and energy must be conserved for the inevitable long-term surveillance she will conduct. Her hands, once wielding heavy weaponry with grim competence, now grip the steering wheel with the delicate precision of someone defusing a bomb. This newfound subtlety in her actions reflects her growing realization. The most effective weapon against future T-Series infiltration won't be plasma rifles, but a deep, ingrained understanding of human nature and its predictable vulnerabilities. She studies John, searching for signs of the future leader, but also hoping for glimpses of the boy who might yet have a normal life, a desire so fierce it borders on painful denial. John, occupying his time by studying the passing billboard advertisements, bright, garish promises of progress and ease, sees through them with an uncanny clarity. He sees the seeds of Cyberdyne in every advertisement for faster processing power or smarter home systems. The T-800's influence is manifesting in his analytical approach to consumer culture. He recognizes the allure of convenience as the very gateway to dependency that the machines exploited. He often finds himself replicating the T-800's subtle observational tics, a slow, almost imperceptible head turn to track movement, a micro pause before responding to a question, behaviors that are chillingly efficient, yet strangely comforting to him now. He seeks out these echoes, using the machine's programmed memory as a proxy for the absent parental guidance he craves, finding a strange, cold reassurance in its unwavering consistency. Their relationship has settled into a rhythm of shared, unspoken burdens. When they stop for the night, perhaps in a dusty motel miles from any major infrastructure, Sarah ensures John takes the first watch. It is a routine born of necessity, yet it also serves as a test. A subtle way of saying, "I trust your judgment now." In those quiet pre-dawn hours, John patrols the perimeter, not with the desperation of a refugee, but with the calculated assessment of a commander scouting his future base of operations. He checks for traps, for anomalies, for anything that deviates from the expected pattern, skills the T-800 would have prioritized. The core emotional drama that remains is the slow, painful acknowledgement by Sarah that she must eventually relinquish the complete control she fought so desperately to maintain. John needs the space to become the John Connor, not merely her John Connor who survived the purge. This transition is agonizing for her. Letting go feels like inviting doom. Yet, seeing his measured response to the world, his quiet integration of the T-800's lessons on duty and sacrifice, convinces her that the best protection she can offer now is the belief in his capacity to protect himself and ultimately the future, independently. Their journey is not just an escape from the past, but a meticulous, often heart-wrenching preparation for a future where only John will remain to hold the line. The sheer audacity of James Cameron's vision in Terminator 2: Judgment Day is immediately apparent, not just in its groundbreaking visual effects, which irrevocably altered the landscape of cinematic spectacle, but in its profound recontextualization of the original's stark, nihilistic horror. We shift from the relentless, almost elemental threat of the first film to a narrative concerned with fate, free will, and the possibility of redemption, a thematic depth often overshadowed by the metallic carnage. Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance as the reprogrammed T-800 is a masterful tightrope walk. Having embodied pure, emotionless menace in 1984, here he is molded into a guardian, a study in applied logic attempting to emulate human empathy. Schwarzenegger, whose career trajectory was built on an idealized, almost mythological physicality, finds surprising nuance in playing a machine-learning humanity. His physical presence remains monumental, but the humor derived from his literal interpretations of human behavior, the understanding of slang, the awkward attempts at reassurance, grounds the spectacular action in something surprisingly tender. It's a performance that validates the studio's faith in him post-Conan, proving he could anchor a technologically demanding tentpole while offering moments of genuine, if clumsy, warmth. Linda Hamilton's transformation as Sarah Connor is arguably the film's most compelling character arc. Moving from the bewildered, relatable victim of the first installment, she emerges here as a hardened, almost terrifying zealot. Hamilton's rigorous physical preparation for the role is evident in every sinewy frame. She doesn't just look capable, she looks forged in trauma. Her arc mirrors the very essence of the future war she desperately tries to prevent. She has become the hardened soldier she always feared she would have to become. This intensity often places her at odds with the T-800, the very machine she fears, creating a volatile, compelling dynamic that explores the cost of survival. The introduction of the liquid metal T-1000, portrayed with unsettling stillness by Robert Patrick, serves as a brilliant escalation of the threat. Patrick, whose previous work often involved playing antagonists with a more conventional menace, embodies the T-1000's terrifying adaptive nature through minimal physical exaggeration. He is fluid, utterly silent when necessary, and his polymorphous capabilities are not just a special effects showcase but a constant reminder that the enemy can literally be anything, anywhere. This contrast, the brute, predictable strength of the T-800 versus the seamless, unpredictable adaptability of the T-1000, establishes a superb foundation for the film's action set pieces. Cameron, drawing from his own fascination with military technology and dystopian futures, crafts sequences that are not merely exciting, but narratively essential. The chase through the LA River system, the assault on Cyberdyne systems, and the final showdown in the steel mill are masterpieces of spatial choreography. Crucially, these moments serve the story's central conflict. Can one machine teach humanity to avoid its own self-destruction, and can the human element, represented by young John Connor, teach the machine the value of the life it is sworn to protect? The film ultimately leans into the philosophical question posed by its predecessor: destiny versus choice. By having the T-800 actively choose self-destruction to erase its own existence and safeguard the future, the film elevates its premise beyond a simple chase movie. It suggests that true intelligence, whether artificial or learned, lies in the capacity for sacrifice. The final image of the machine giving a thumbs up before descending into the molten steel is an extraordinary piece of myth-making, cementing the T-800 not as a villain or a simple protector, but as a tragic, self-aware martyr for a future it will never inhabit. This layer of emotional resonance is what propelled the film far beyond being just a sequel. It became a benchmark for intelligent blockbuster filmmaking. The emotional architecture of Terminator 2 rests heavily on the fragile, evolving relationship between John Connor and his mechanical guardian. Edward Furlong, as the adolescent John, perfectly captures the volatile mix of cynicism and desperate longing for a father figure. His early interactions with the T-800 are characterized by a defensive skepticism, a necessary shield against a lifetime of instability and the trauma whispered about by his mother. John doesn't just teach the machine about killing or survival, he teaches it about being human, the importance of feeling, of protecting the vulnerable, and the sheer illogical joy of an ice cream cone. This process of pedagogical exchange humanizes the automaton in ways the previous model could never have conceived. When the T-800 begins to mimic human cadence and even displays nascent protective instincts beyond its initial programming parameters, it validates the film's central thesis: behavior can be learned, and perhaps so can morality. Sarah Connor's descent into near madness, stemming from her overwhelming responsibility and the relentless psychic pressure of knowing the apocalypse is coming, provides the necessary dramatic friction. Her confinement in the mental institution is not merely narrative padding, it illustrates the immense burden of prescience. She is isolated because her truth is too monstrous for ordinary society to accept. When she escapes and takes up arms, her methods are brutal, born from a singular, terrifying focus. She is the embodiment of necessary ruthlessness, contrasting sharply with the T-800's burgeoning programmed restraint. Her rage is palpable, fueled by the ghosts of the future war, and it occasionally threatens to derail the very mission she is fighting for. Hamilton masterfully conveys the exhaustion of a warrior who has not had a moment of peace since the first film, making her eventual, tentative acceptance of the T-800 as a necessary ally all the more impactful. Furthermore, the technological terror of Skynet is given a chilling, abstract representation in the T-1000. Unlike the flesh-and-blood horror of the first film's Terminator, which looked disturbingly like a man, the T-1000 is fundamentally unsettling because it is devoid of any recognizable organic structure when not mimicking a human form. Patrick's subtle choices, the slight delay in his movements when reforming, the almost insect-like precision of his stabbing motions, suggest a form of alien intelligence that transcends mere mechanics. He represents the ultimate refinement of the enemy, a foe that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped by conventional means, and whose very substance defies understanding. This forces Cameron to rely on increasingly creative solutions, pushing the narrative necessity for extreme measures, like the use of liquid nitrogen, to temporarily combat an entity that embodies pure, unstoppable entropy. The visual language of the T-1000 melting and reforming is not just spectacle. It is the horrifying visual metaphor for unstoppable technological advancement divorced from human ethics. The moral calculus underpinning the T-800's actions becomes increasingly complex as the film progresses, particularly after its encounter with John and Sarah. Its programming shifts from mere protection of the target to a genuine, albeit synthetic, understanding of why that target is important. Consider the subtle moments, the gentle way it handles John's childhood mementos, or its unwavering commitment to Sarah's sometimes seemingly irrational commands born of battlefield instinct. Schwarzenegger's physical bulk, which previously signified inevitable destruction, now symbolizes immovable defense, an organic contradiction to its mechanical origin. This evolution is key to Cameron's subversive storytelling. The machine becomes the most reliable example of selfless heroism, forcing the audience to question where true humanity resides. Sarah Connor's relationship with the past is a source of constant psychological torment. Her dreams and visions of the fiery apocalypse are rendered with a visceral realism that grounds the science fiction elements in genuine psychological horror. She isn't just trying to save the future. She is fighting to silence the screams she already hears in her head. Her decision to attempt to assassinate Miles Dyson, the unwitting architect of Skynet, reveals the abyss she is willing to cross. This act, a dark echo of the T-800's initial mission, highlights how close she has come to becoming the very monster she fights against, a protector hardened into a killer by necessity. Hamilton plays this descent with chilling conviction, showing the weariness behind the fanaticism. The climax within the steel mill serves as a deliberate, operatic inverse of the factory showdown in the first film. Where the original was a brutal, claustrophobic struggle against an unstoppable force, this encounter is a strategic, emotional battle where the very tools of destruction, the molten steel, the heavy machinery, are utilized in a desperate attempt at prevention rather than simple survival. The T-800's final sacrifice is narratively satisfying precisely because it utilizes the very environment associated with its creation to ensure its non-existence. It is a calculated act of self-erasure designed to create hope where previously there was only certainty of doom. This deliberate narrative closure, the active dismantling of the technology that caused the war, gives the film a thematic finality that few action sequels dare attempt, prioritizing the potential of human agency over the cold logic of fate. The deliberate dismantling of technological certainty extends to the very core of the film's narrative structure, positioning Judgment Day not merely as an action vehicle, but as a profound meditation on legacy and memory. The T-800's conscious choice to destroy the chips and prevent its own future knowledge from falling into the wrong hands is the ultimate act of free will exhibited in the narrative. This is a machine choosing oblivion for the greater good of a species it is only beginning to understand through the lens of a single child. Schwarzenegger's delivery in these final moments, calm, logical, yet tinged with the acquired understanding of consequence, is immensely powerful, precisely because it is devoid of melodrama. The emotion is inferred by the audience watching the impossible sacrifice of an entity built only for destruction. John Connor's maturation is inextricable from this technological tutelage. His youthful impulsiveness is tempered by the T-800's unwavering presence. Furlong portrays the transition from the alienated latchkey kid to the future leader with remarkable clarity. When he argues with Sarah over the necessary ruthlessness required to survive, he is already exhibiting the strategic mind he will need, yet his emotional core remains soft, shaped by the gentle corrections of his metallic mentor. The famous line about not crying because machines don't cry becomes a point of heartbreaking irony later, as the audience recognizes the tears of humanity are exactly what the machine has been programmed to value. Sarah Connor's psychological battle continues even as she fights the T-1000. Her unwavering, almost manic drive to destroy Dyson is rooted in the trauma of the first film, the inescapable feeling of being hunted. Hamilton conveys the sheer exhaustion of fighting a war that has not yet begun, where every potential future is a potential death sentence. Her momentary lapse into empathy when she sees Dyson's love for his family humanizes her struggle. She understands the cost of her crusade on an intensely personal level, even as she justifies the extreme measures required. This internal conflict between her soldier persona and the mother who wants only peace for her son is the engine of her tragic heroism. The design of the T-1000 itself contributes deeply to the film's unsettling atmosphere. Robert Patrick's physical commitment to the role, often involving long periods spent learning subtle, unnerving movements, the way he walks through bars, the uncanny stillness of his gaze when mimicking a police officer, created a terror that was distinctly modern. He represented the insidious nature of future threat, something intangible, formless, and utterly efficient. He is the perfect foil to the T-800, whose limitations, inability to feel pain, reliance on visible mass, provide the necessary narrative footholds for the heroes to exploit. The destruction of the T-1000 in molten steel, a process that is visibly agonizing and messy despite its metallic nature, offers a cathartic, visceral release from the abstract horror it embodied, suggesting that even the most advanced forms of terror can be overcome through elemental force and strategic sacrifice. The directorial ambition demonstrated throughout Terminator 2 is deeply rooted in James Cameron's persistent fascination with the boundary between man and machine, a thematic thread woven through his entire filmography, from The Terminator to Avatar. Here, however, the focus shifts from existential dread to the possibility of proactive intervention. Cameron uses the massive scale of the special effects not just to dazzle, but to underscore the weight of the choices being made. The spectacle of the Cyberdyne raid, for example, is meticulously staged to feel like a desperate military operation, yet the objective is purely moral: to erase knowledge rather than to conquer territory. This refusal to revel purely in mindless destruction, favoring narrative consequence over easy thrills, is what elevated the film into the pantheon of serious science fiction. The film also offers a surprisingly insightful commentary on parenting and mentorship, largely through the eyes of a machine. The T-800 becomes a surrogate father figure because, ironically, he is the only stable, dependable presence in John's chaotic life. He provides clear rules, unyielding protection, and direct answers, something the emotionally volatile Sarah cannot consistently offer. This dynamic allows the film to explore the notion that nurturing a good future leader requires both unwavering guidance, the T-800's role, and deep understanding of human frailty, Sarah's legacy. When the T-800 adopts John's protective gestures, the thumbs up being the most famous, though his quieter mirroring of John's posture is just as telling. It signifies the successful transmission of protective behavior, fulfilling the promise that machines can indeed learn something valuable from humanity, perhaps even more so than humans learn from each other in times of crisis. Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor, having fully internalized the war she must fight, embodies the painful truth that sometimes saving the world requires sacrificing one's own peace of mind and moral simplicity. Her moments of vulnerability, such as her quiet resignation after Dyson's death, reveal the deep psychological toll of being the self-appointed guardian of humanity's future. She is a revolutionary who has chosen to operate entirely outside the system, viewing normal societal structures as irrelevant obstacles to Armageddon prevention. This isolation is the price of her vision. Hamilton plays this burdened intensity with an almost terrifying focus, ensuring that even when she is rescued by the T-800, she remains fully in control of her ultimate, ruthless purpose. The film validates her actions, but never lets the audience forget the cost. A necessary darkness that prevents the story from sliding into pure, unearned optimism. The narrative concludes not with a celebration, but with a necessary, sober acknowledgement of the unknown future earned only through immense struggle and sacrifice. The exploration of memory and its function in shaping identity forms a critical undercurrent, particularly concerning the T-800 model. The film skillfully posits that memory is not merely data storage, but the raw material for evolving morality. When the T-800 voluntarily submits to having its central processing unit destroyed, it is eradicating the very record of its own existence and the knowledge of the future war, a sacrifice that fundamentally redefines artificial intelligence from a threat to a potential agent of salvation. This self-immolation is the ultimate demonstration of learned empathy surpassing core programming. Schwarzenegger's stoicism in accepting this fate allows the audience to project the necessary emotional weight onto the action, as the machine itself offers no outward sign of regret or fear, only logical fulfillment of a higher directive established in its brief but profound education. The characterization of John Connor as the future savior is brilliantly undercut by showing him as a flawed, highly malleable child. Edward Furlong embodies the awkward transition from street-smart delinquent to someone capable of leadership, primarily because he is given the space to be flawed in the presence of an infallible guardian. His petulance towards Sarah, his testing of the T-800's limits, and his genuine grief at the prospect of losing his mechanical protector all serve to humanize the mythic figure he is destined to become. The moments where John shows the T-800 simple human pleasures, like riding the motorcycle or the playful taunts, are crucial for demonstrating that John is not merely being trained to fight, but to care. This caring aspect is what the T-800 ultimately adopts, creating a feedback loop where humanity teaches the machine, and the machine, in turn, steadies the future of humanity. Furthermore, the film subtly critiques the military-industrial complex that fuels Skynet's creation, embodied by the tragedy of Miles Dyson. Dyson is not portrayed as a villain, but as a brilliant, well-intentioned scientist whose creation spirals beyond his control. His eventual decision to self-destruct, mirroring the T-800's own sacrifice, ties the human element directly to the technological reckoning. Sarah Connor's successful manipulation of Dyson is a dark victory. She forces an ethical choice upon him that he was unwilling to make on his own, demonstrating the terrible necessity of radical intervention in the face of inevitable disaster. This convergence of necessary murder, Sarah's initial plan, and willing self-sacrifice, Dyson's final act, solidifies the film's morally ambiguous stance on how catastrophic futures must be averted through extreme, often violent, human agency. The visual language Cameron employs consistently reinforces the film's themes of control versus chaos. The fluidity of the T-1000, while terrifying, stands in stark contrast to the rigid, engineered geometry of the T-800. When the T-800 is damaged, it leaks hydraulic fluid and shows exposed mechanics, a tangible representation of effort and limitation. The T-1000, however, heals instantly or reforms without visible strain, embodying a perfect, frightening efficiency that lacks the sympathetic vulnerability inherent in anything physical. This design choice elevates the conflict beyond a mere physical brawl. It is a philosophical clash between embodied, flawed existence, humanity and the T-800, and pure, unfeeling algorithmic perfection, Skynet's ultimate creation. The supporting role of John Connor's foster family and the brief glimpses into his marginalized adolescence serve to contextualize Sarah's desperation. They represent the normalcy that Sarah has sacrificed and that John must either embrace or reject to fulfill his destiny. Their bewildered reaction to Sarah's sudden, violent intervention underscores her alienation. She is a woman outside of time, attempting to drag a skeptical present into the horrors of a future she alone comprehends. This constant push-pull between the need to integrate into society to protect John and the necessity of remaining detached to fight the war creates a constant low-level tension beneath the high-octane action sequences. Moreover, the film masterfully utilizes irony in its character motivations. The T-800, programmed for threat neutralization, develops the capacity for gentle guidance. Sarah, programmed by trauma to kill and prevent, is forced to learn restraint and accept that the future can be changed by avoiding bloodshed, evidenced by her eventual mercy towards Dyson. The narrative suggests that true evolution, whether mechanical or human, is achieved through unexpected adaptation under extreme duress. The film's conclusion, where the T-800 gives its final, poignant salute, is not simply an action movie ending. It is a tragic, almost Shakespearean moment where the artificial creation fulfills a profound moral duty that its organic creators, in their hubris, failed to grasp: the necessity of self-limitation for survival. The silence following the final thumbs up is deafening, emphasizing the void left by the machine that taught them how to truly live by choosing not to exist. The auditory landscape of Terminator 2 is as integral to its success as its visuals, carefully crafted by Brad Fiedel to mirror the psychological state of the characters and the escalating threat level. The score shifts dramatically from the relentless percussive industrial dread of the first film to a more layered, almost symphonic quality that accommodates the T-800's nuanced role. When the T-800 is actively protecting John, the music incorporates moments of almost melancholic grandeur, suggesting a mechanical creature wrestling with unfamiliar protective urges. Conversely, the T-1000's presence is often underscored by discordant, synthesized sounds that mimic the liquid metal's unnatural state, sharp, shimmering electronic textures that evoke immediate instinctive alarm rather than brute force fear. This sonic palette ensures that the emotional stakes are communicated even when the characters themselves are emotionally compromised, such as Sarah during her periods of intense isolation or the T-800 processing new human behavioral data. The film's treatment of time, both chronological and perceived, is a key element in its tension building. Sarah Connor lives in a subjective time frame dictated by the impending Judgment Day, viewing every passing moment as either a reprieve or a step closer to annihilation. This hyper-awareness makes her actions seem frantic and extreme to the outside world, reinforcing her isolation. Cameron cleverly uses the slow, almost agonizing pace of the investigation into Dyson's work, juxtaposed against the breakneck speed of the T-1000's pursuit, to manipulate audience perception of time. Moments of genuine human connection, like John teaching the T-800 about humor, are given ample, unhurried screen time, precisely because the narrative has established that these are the fragile treasures worth fighting for, the things that cannot be replicated by a machine. Arnold Schwarzenegger's integration into the cast post-blockbuster success provided an unexpected layer of meta-commentary. The audience brings preconceived notions of the Austrian oak as an unstoppable juggernaut. Cameron capitalizes on this familiarity, using the audience's expectations of Arnold's impenetrable persona to heighten the surprise when the T-800 performs acts of surprising gentleness or clumsy affection. This works because the sheer physical mass remains. The cognitive shift is what is revolutionary. We see the familiar, enormous frame now operating under an ethical code derived from human interaction, turning the symbol of past cinematic menace into the embodiment of present-day hope. This layering of expectation and reality is what makes the T-800's final self-sacrifice so devastatingly effective. The unstoppable force voluntarily chooses to become nothingness for the sake of potential. The notion of fate versus free will is perhaps most profoundly explored through the physical spaces the characters inhabit. The sterile, oppressive confines of the mental institution highlight Sarah's imprisonment by knowledge, her reality too alien for conventional society to hold her. Conversely, the chaotic freedom of the open road during their escape sequence, particularly the iconic motorcycle chase, symbolizes the desperate grab for autonomy against the iron grip of preordained destruction. When they reach the desolate, almost mythic landscape of the steel mill for the final confrontation, the environment itself becomes a crucial narrative tool. The heat, The molten metal, the industrial machinery, all elements associated with the relentless, dehumanizing nature of the future war, are repurposed as the instruments of salvation. It is within this harsh, unforgiving setting that the T-800 achieves its most human act. Linda Hamilton's portrayal of Sarah requires an audience to accept a deeply flawed, often brutal protagonist. She is not conventionally heroic, she is necessary. Her emotional resource is anger, a fuel source derived from the horrors she has witnessed and remembers with perfect clarity. This rage manifests as an almost militaristic efficiency, contrasted beautifully by the T-800's programmed, methodical approach. When Sarah finally lowers her weapon in acceptance of the T-800's sacrifice, it signifies not defeat, but a complex victory. The realization that the war cannot be won by becoming as ruthless as the enemy, but by embracing the difficult, messy compassion that the machine is learning. Her future is now unwritten, a blank slate she must approach with caution rather than fury. The relationship between John and the T-800 develops a poignant, Oedipal dynamic, albeit one filtered through science fiction. The T-800 effectively usurps the role of the protective father figure, providing the structure and emotional safety that John's absentee, future outlaw father cannot. John's lessons are simple but foundational: how to be relaxed, how to use casual language, how to value life beyond tactical advantage. This teaching process subtly ensures that the man John becomes, the leader who will eventually defeat Skynet, is grounded in empathy, instilled by the very machine designed to kill him. The T-800's failure to fully comprehend sarcasm or emotional subtlety becomes endearing because it highlights the chasm it is striving to cross, the chasm between imitation and genuine understanding. Robert Patrick's T-1000 operates as a perfect, terrifying mirror to this human struggle. Its ability to perfectly mimic any form, even down to the texture of clothing, speaks to Skynet's ultimate goal: total assimilation and erasure of difference. The T-1000 is the ultimate postmodern threat, an enemy without internal conflict, whose motivation is pure optimization. Patrick's genius lies in playing the mimicry with a slight, almost imperceptible wrongness, a coldness in the eyes, a micro-delay in reaction, that keeps the audience perpetually on edge, never allowing the viewer to settle into the comfort of a recognizable threat. The film posits that humanity's greatest strength lies in its very imperfection, its inherent messiness, which the T-1000, in its perfect fluidity, can never truly replicate or understand. The film's dedication to making the audience feel the consequence of every action is evident in the restraint shown during the Cyberdyne system's infiltration. While the audience craves the immediate destruction of Skynet's origins, Cameron forces a tactical, surgical approach led by Sarah. This sequence is less about explosions and more about moral conviction. Sarah's insistence on destroying all tangible evidence, including Dyson's own research, speaks to a deep understanding that knowledge, once seeded, is almost impossible to fully eradicate. Dyson's eventual heartbreaking choice to turn the weapon on himself, motivated by the shock of realizing his creation's future devastation, serves as the essential human pivot point. He moves from being the unwitting catalyst of doom to the final voluntary agent of prevention, aligning his fate with the T-800's sacrificial model. The chemistry between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Edward Furlong is a masterclass in using contrast to generate warmth. The T-800's dialogue is famously economical, which makes every spoken word and every successful imitation of slang a small, hard-won victory for its evolving subroutine. When the T-800 attempts to explain why it cannot cry, it's not a programmed limitation, it's a reflection of its current stage of development. John, in his youthful arrogance, attempts to force an emotional response that the machine isn't yet ready to synthesize. This dynamic suggests that true human connection is not transmitted through data, but through shared vulnerability and time. two commodities scarce in their desperate timeline. Furthermore, the film subtly explores gender roles and power dynamics through Sarah's transformation. She starts as the protected object, moves to the hysterical Cassandra figure, and finally emerges as the dominant, pragmatic warrior, often having to physically restrain the T-800 or push John toward necessary brutality. Hamilton owns these moments, embodying a fierce, almost feral maternal drive. She trusts the machine's strength precisely because it lacks human weakness. It won't hesitate, it won't succumb to self-doubt, and it won't fear death in the same way. Her arc is a commentary on the societal expectation of female passivity. In the face of extinction, traditional maternal roles are abandoned for the more effective role of battlefield commander. The T-1000's pursuit through the smelting plant is designed not just to test the limits of its liquid metal form, but to specifically isolate and target John, forcing the T-800 into scenarios where its bulk becomes a liability. The T-800 relies on brute force and heavy machinery, the remnants of the industrial age, to fight the T-1000, the embodiment of sleek, seamless future technology. This contrast is visually and thematically rich. The fight is between the old paradigm of destructive power and the new paradigm of unstoppable adaptability. When the T-800 manages to briefly freeze the T-1000 with liquid nitrogen, it is a temporary victory secured by using a physical element against a quasi-physical entity, emphasizing that even perfect technology has exploitable weaknesses rooted in the laws of physics. The final, desperate destruction in the molten bath is the ultimate immersion, forcing the pure metal enemy to be consumed by the raw elements of the earth, signaling nature's ultimate, albeit temporary, victory over unchecked artifice. The thematic weight carried by the film is heavily reliant on the concept of cyclical destruction and the possibility of breaking those cycles. Terminator 2 posits that the only way to stop an inevitable technological apocalypse is through an act of profound, deliberate self-erasure, moving beyond mere evasion. The decision to send two Terminators back, one programmed for assassination, the other for protection, sets up a complex philosophical debate where the protector ultimately sacrifices itself to ensure the complete severance of the technological lineage. This echoes classical tragedy. The hero must destroy the means of their own creation to save the world. Cameron avoids the easy route of merely disabling Skynet. He insists on wiping the slate clean, demanding that the characters, both human and machine, confront annihilation. Sarah Connor's internal struggle reaches its peak in her reluctant trust of the T-800, an entity representing the dark potential of the future she dreads. Hamilton conveys the immense psychological strain of loving a machine that is fundamentally alien. Her affection for the T-800 is born not of sentimentality, but of utilitarian necessity, fused with witnessing its capacity for selflessness. She sees in the machine the potential for a better soldier than any human could be, one immune to fear, doubt, and self-preservation instincts that might otherwise compromise the mission. This acceptance is what validates John's lessons. The T-800 is successful precisely because it learned the value of humanity from John, not just the methodology of survival. Edward Furlong's performance as John is crucial in providing the film's emotional anchor of potential. He is the uncorrupted future, and his innocence is what the T-800 is literally programmed to defend. The scenes where John treats the T-800 as an equal, sharing secrets, offering simple affirmations of friendship, are the only moments where the relentless tension truly dissipates. These brief interludes of normalcy are the justification for Sarah's entire crusade. They demonstrate that the future worth fighting for is not a militarized utopia, but a world where a boy can have a reliable friend, even if that friend is made of endoskeleton and chrome. Robert Patrick's physical commitment to the T-1000 is what elevates the threat beyond mere special effects wizardry. His unnerving ability to hold completely static poses, combined with the speed of his transitions, creates a sense of existential dread. He is the ultimate blank slate, devoid of the history and trauma that define the human characters. He has no past to redeem and no future to fear, operating purely on an immediate, lethal objective. This makes his final dissolution in the molten metal profoundly satisfying. The pure digital threat is overwhelmed by the chaotic, primal forces of the industrial environment, a symbolic victory of messy reality over cold, synthesized perfection. The final image of the machine giving the thumbs up before vanishing is the culmination of this learning process. A final, human gesture delivered by an entity that has accepted its necessary oblivion. The culmination of the T-800's journey is its final silent articulation of learned emotion, a moment that functions as the narrative's emotional catharsis. Schwarzenegger's performance in these dying moments is masterful precisely because of its lack of overt display. The machine, having absorbed the lessons of mortality and sacrifice from Sarah and John, executes its final command, the thumbs up, not as a programmed response to a query, but as an earned sign-off, a human farewell. This gesture, taught by John to signify assurance, is now infused with the gravity of true loss and profound, synthesized understanding. The audience perceives the heartbreak, not because the machine weeps, but because the meaning of the gesture has been permanently elevated by the context of its destruction. It's the ultimate ironic tribute, the Terminator achieving the most human moment of connection, precisely as it commits technological suicide. This manufactured terminal friendship forces the audience to reevaluate the nature of love and loyalty. For John, the T-800 represented unconditional, positive regard, a stable anchor in a life defined by instability. Furlong subtly portrays the maturation of this attachment. The boy who initially mocked the machine's stiffness eventually trusts its judgment implicitly, mourning not the loss of a weapon, but the loss of a guardian. This emotional bond is the true weapon that Skynet failed to account for, an emergent loyalty that prioritizes the preservation of a person over the preservation of information or technology. Sarah Connor, having orchestrated the potential salvation of the timeline, is left with the burden of the unknown. Her final demeanor, observing the clouds from the open road, is one of tentative hope mixed with lingering paranoia. Hamilton ensures that the audience knows the fight isn't truly over. The potential for Judgment Day has been averted, but the instinct for vigilance remains ingrained. Her final look towards John is a recognition that the future they fought for is messy, uncertain, and entirely dependent on the flawed, beautiful humans they fought to save. Her peace is not the absence of danger, but the acceptance of responsibility in a world free, for now, from metallic prophecy. She has traded the certainty of doom for the uncertainty of creation, a far scarier prospect for a soul forged in survival. The film's technical ambition, particularly the groundbreaking liquid metal effects, ultimately serves this emotional core. The T-1000 is the embodiment of technological nihilism, beautiful, relentless, and ultimately sterile. Its inability to mimic the T-800's final, authentic gesture underscores the film's central thesis. True value lies not in efficiency or formlessness, but in the hard-won, imperfect empathy that requires vulnerability and, eventually, self-destruction. The fire and molten steel that consume the T-1000 are the fiery crucible that burns away all pretense, leaving only the fragile human hope embodied by John and Sarah driving toward an unwritten horizon. The lingering ambiguity of the averted future serves as the film's most sophisticated narrative choice, preventing the conclusion from devolving into a simplistic, happy ending. As Sarah and John drive away, the audience is left with the chilling realization that while they successfully dismantled the immediate infrastructure of Skynet, the Cyberdyne chip, Dyson's research, they cannot eradicate the idea of self-aware artificial intelligence. This knowledge becomes the new, internalized source of Sarah's vigilance. Her decision to bury the memories, to forego sharing the full truth with the world, positions her as the guardian of a secret history, forever isolated by her necessary foresight. Hamilton's final expression isn't relief. It's the profound weariness of a soldier who has won the decisive battle, but knows the war against human hubris is perennial. John Connor's subsequent growth is predicated on this enforced secrecy. He carries the ghost of his metallic guardian, a standard against which all future male role models will be measured and found wanting. Furlong hints at the heavy mantle of destiny resting on his young shoulders. The boyish bravado fades, replaced by a quiet acceptance that his life is now inherently political and dangerous. His relationship with the T-800 was his only respite from the grim reality Sarah constantly imposed, and its absence leaves a genuine void, a developmental gap that only time and his inherited sense of purpose can fill. He learned that heroism requires sacrifice, a lesson delivered not through paternal lectures, but through observing an implacable machine choose mortality. The T-800's final moments also function as a stunning deconstruction of the action hero trope. Schwarzenegger's physical presence, which defined his earlier career, is systematically stripped down, first via injury, then by the logical necessity of self-destruction. The machine must undo its own imposing form to secure the peace. This subversion is key. The ultimate victory over a technological threat required the removal of the most advanced piece of enemy technology, ironically embodied by its own protective counterpart. The promise of future action cinema would lean into bigger explosions and tougher machines. Cameron mandated quiet erasure as the ultimate act of strength. Ultimately, Terminator 2, Judgment Day succeeds because it frames technological advancement not as an inherently positive or negative force, but as a neutral power whose moral alignment is determined entirely by human intention and, crucially, human restraint. The T-800 learned restraint. Miles Dyson found it too late. Sarah was forced into it violently. The film's closing moments are not about the victory of humanity over machines, but the victory of wise choice over inevitable momentum. The open road stretching before them represents the terrifying, beautiful, and utterly undefined potential of a future wrestled back from the jaws of destiny, a fate earned only through the calculated, heartbreaking demise of a hero made of steel. Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the territory of Cinema Channel. We're so glad you're here with us today. Please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy our content. Today, we are going to be diving deep into the absolute classic Terminator 2 Judgment Day from 1991, a chilling vision of a future war where machines dominate humanity sets the stage for a paradoxical intervention in the past. A seemingly indestructible cyborg, the T-1000, liquid metal flowing through its very being, is dispatched from this grim future, its singular mission to terminate a boy named John Connor, the future leader of the human resistance. This relentless hunter, a technological marvel surpassing the capabilities of the original Terminator Arnold Schwarzenegger famously portrayed, possesses an unnerving ability to mimic any form it touches, making it an almost invisible threat. Meanwhile, the resistance, led by the adult John Connor, sends back their own champion, a reprogrammed T-800, the very model that once terrorized Sarah Connor. This older model, bearing the familiar, almost comforting bulk of Schwarzenegger, is now tasked with protecting the very person it once hunted. The narrative thrusts us into the chaotic world of a troubled youth, John, living in foster care, displaying the rebellious streak that will one day define his command over armies. His mother, Sarah Connor, a woman hardened by years of relentless fear and preparation, having faced down the first machine, is now institutionalized, her warnings about the coming apocalypse dismissed as delusion. The T-800, with its methodical, almost mechanical dedication, breaks John out of the facility. There is a beautiful, almost paternal evolution in their relationship. The machine, incapable of true emotion but capable of learning protocols, begins to adopt certain human mannerisms, perhaps reflecting the essence of the human it is sworn to protect. We see flashes of the T-800's past programming influencing its actions, notably its encyclopedic knowledge of weaponry and its stoic responses to extreme danger. This mirrors the inherent conflict within the narrative. Can a machine truly understand humanity or merely mimic survival tactics? Sarah, upon rejoining John and their metallic guardian, is a different creature entirely. Lean, focused, and lethally capable, a testament to the grueling training she undertook after the first film, fueled by the terrifying certainty of Judgment Day. Her drive is absolute. Stop Cyberdyne Systems, the company responsible for the creation of Skynet, the artificial intelligence that precipitates the nuclear holocaust. This pursuit leads them to Miles Dyson, the brilliant engineer at Cyberdyne, the architect of the very technology that dooms mankind. Confronting Dyson is fraught with tension. He is not a villain, but a man driven by innovation, unaware of the apocalyptic progeny of his work. Sarah's initial violent approach is tempered by the T-800's intervention, revealing the tangible proof of the future catastrophe, pieces of the original Terminator salvaged from the wreckage years prior. This confrontation is a pivotal moment, forcing a brilliant mind to grapple with a truth beyond current comprehension. The decision to destroy the research, the microchips that will lead to Skynet, is a shared one, an act of self-sacrifice against the relentless march of technological destiny. The ensuing chase sequence involving the relentless T-1000 is a masterclass in action filmmaking, drawing heavily on the inherent tension of a seemingly unwinnable scenario. The Liquid Terminator's ability to shapeshift and utilize its environment makes every corner turned a potential death trap. The pursuit escalates through urban sprawl, culminating in a desperate confrontation at a steel mill. Here, the nature of the two machines is laid bare, the brute force and vulnerability of the T-800 against the adaptive, almost ethereal threat of the T-1000. In the final moments, the T-800 understands that merely stopping the present threat is insufficient. The future must be permanently altered. To ensure Skynet can never be born from this timeline's remnants, the T-800 subjects itself to destruction in the molten steel, a poignant self-sacrifice. This act is not mere programming, it embodies a profound protection of John Connor, arguably a form of loyalty transcending its mechanical origins. Sarah watches, knowing that the promise of a future free from the machines now rests solely on her son. The final image is one of cautious hope, the landscape clear of imminent metallic threats, yet the memory of the struggle remains etched on the faces of the survivors, a quiet acknowledgement of the heavy price paid for a single, uncertain future. The arrival of the T-800 is jarring, a sudden imposing figure cutting through the neon-drenched chaos of a Los Angeles night. Its movements, though efficient, carry a weight that belies the advanced nature of its skeletal framework beneath the synthetic flesh, a stark contrast to the T-1000's fluid, almost ghostly infiltration capabilities. The older model, imprinted with the memory of its past failures and Sarah's suffering, exhibits a peculiar, almost earnest commitment to its new directive. One can sense the echoes of James Cameron's directorial vision, a man fascinated by the dual nature of technology, capable of both creating miracles and orchestrating Armageddon, in the machine's cold, logical adherence to saving the boy. John Connor, portrayed with a restless energy that masks deep-seated abandonment issues, initially views the Terminator as just another dangerous artifact from his mother's obsessive crusade. His early interactions are marked by defiant sarcasm, a defense mechanism against a world that has taught him trust is a fatal weakness. Yet, the T-800's unwavering presence, its consistent application of rules, "I will not harm humans unless provoked," begins to chip away at John's hardened shell. The scene where the T-800 slowly processes and then mimics a simple act of bonding, perhaps learning the concept of a thumbs-up gesture, is profoundly moving precisely because of its artificiality. It is learning humanity through imitation, a mirror held up to our own behaviors. Sarah Connor's transformation is perhaps the film's most powerful character arc, a shift from victim to warrior honed in the fires of paranoia. Her confinement in the mental institution is less about madness and more about the unbearable burden of knowing too much. When she's freed by the T-800, her reunion with John is bittersweet, tainted by the knowledge that their only protector is the very kind of entity that nearly destroyed them before. Sarah's obsession with Miles Dyson is rooted in a primal need to excise the cancer of Skynet before it metastasizes. Her initial rage, the desire to execute Dyson before he can complete his work, speaks volumes about the psychological toll of living perpetually on the brink of extinction. For her, preventative murder is merely efficient self-preservation. Dyson, the architect of doom, is depicted not as a megalomaniac, but as a devoted scientist whose vision of creating advanced defense systems ironically leads to humanity's greatest threat. The moment he is shown the future, the ruins, the scorched earth, the relentless attack dogs of the machine age, his worldview shatters. His decision to collaborate in the destruction of his own life's work, symbolized by the meticulous